She didn't take off the crown or touch the pictures. This time, she chose something quieter, the one medal that the Queen never let anyone else touch. The U.S. Honor Medal was given to Elizabeth II by the President of the United States following 9/11. She took it out of the sealed exhibition case and pinned it to the chest of her ex-husband, the guy who had left her. She said Camilla called it a gesture of closure, a personal tribute, and for a minute, it seemed like no one would question her. But then one royal guard stepped up and said 6 words that made everyone in the room stop. "It wasn't yours to give. Before we tell you what happened when King Charles walked in and saw who was wearing the Queen's award, please leave a comment to let us know where in the world you are viewing from. Stay right here and make sure you're subscribed with the bell symbol on." It wasn't about the medal. It was about what she put behind glass, and the man who remained still until it was put back. There was a type of silence at Windsor Castle in the mornings that wasn't empty. It was calm and predictable, like the kind of stillness that comes from decades of polished stone, clipped rituals, and soft shoes on carpet that had been there for hundreds of years. Sergeant Edric Vaughan stood at the edge of the blue drawing room, with a clipboard in one hand, and the other hand tracing the polished brass edge of a glass case that was now empty. The U.S. Honor Medal for the Queen was gone. He didn't freak out. He didn't even frown, but the way he stopped moving was sharp and measured, like he was following the rules. The display had been logged and sealed for more than a year. It was placed below an oil painting of Queen Elizabeth and next to a folded Union Jack. The medal had been sitting in that simple oak-framed cabinet for a long time. It was a round medallion with a brushed silver finish and a ribbon that was half British red and blue and half the dark navy and white of a foreign flag. There was a small brass plaque behind it that said Private Recognition, United States 2004. The Queen had never worn it or talked about it in public, but many who worked for her knew what it meant. It was awarded to her privately during a state visit as a sign of her role in secret support efforts after the September 11th attacks. Edric recalls the day it was put in. There was no ceremony, no press, just an aide, 2 gloves, and a thin covering of museum-grade glass. Now that the glass had folded, there was no tag on the log to take it off, and the velvet cushion was empty. Edric looked at the white linen-covered podium that was right below the case. The laminated display list was remained the same. The medal was still listed as number 3, with the words Transatlantic Honor, Private Gift. He turned the page on his clipboard and carefully traced the barcode log with his finger. Nothing. He tapped the stylus against the corner of the frame and adjusted the cuffs of his sleeves. "Where's the medal?" The voice was gentle and not aimed for anyone in particular, but a youthful assistant nearby, who was only a little older than the castle's doorknobs, glanced around uneasily. "I think she stepped forward," she said in a whisper. "Her Majesty asked for it to be taken out this morning. It had something to do with a presentation." Edric's jaw didn't get tighter. His position didn't change, but something behind his gaze became colder and slower. "A presentation," he remarked in a low voice. She agreed. "Private tea, the East Parlor." He didn't say anything, simply nodded, and then looked back at the empty glass. The high windows let in the morning sun, which lit up the faint outline left behind on the velvet pad where the medal formerly lay. It was a shadow of something that shouldn't have moved. Edric didn't say anything, but he put the clipboard under his arm and left the room. Something was broken. It wasn't simply the chain of custody, either. The east wing always seemed to be warmer than the rest of the castle. It wasn't the sunlight coming in through the mullioned windows or the low radiators that were hidden behind the curtains. It was the casualness, the place for private teas and favors, where things were spoken that never made it to the official calendar. Sergeant Edric Vaughan walked through its halls like a guy walking through a wall of glass, carefully, quietly, and not trusting what he may hear. He stopped at the footman's desk in the East Parlor and gave him the tablet from his job belt. "Get the morning transfer log. I'm looking for any entries that have inventory code 3LUE. The footman looked up and suddenly became pale. 3 blue, that's the medal, isn't it? Edric didn't even blink. Yes. The young man thought for a moment. There's no digital record. Just this. He took a folded valet slip from a small stack of personal orders. It was handwritten and signed in blue ink. For presentation, 10 a.m. CPCs. There was no list of items, no clearance number, and no second signature. Edric read it once and then put it in the sleeve of his tablet. He went on. He plugged into the East Wing's security terminal at the end of the hall and loaded the logs for that morning's surveillance. Fast forward to 9:54. 2 footmen strolled down the corridor with white gloves on, carrying a long velvet box. This kind of box is only used for fragile heirlooms, no escort, and no seal on the archives. The video showed them going inside the East Parlor at 10:02. They left at 10:48 without anything. Edric leaned back a little, and even though his face didn't change, his posture did. He wasn't just standing straight and stiff, as if his whole body was fighting the weight of what he already suspected. He rewound the video and viewed it again. There was a brief time at 10:47 when the door opened further, immediately before the footman left. Edric saw it through the gap, a flash of silver on a dark jacket. The metal was already pinned on and worn. He stopped the frame and moved closer to the screen. Andrew Parker BS sitting sideways, holding a teacup, with the metal clearly visible on his left lapel. Camilla was smiling next to him. One of her hands was on his shoulder, relaxed, familiar, and proud. Edric took a deep breath, took a screenshot of the frame, encrypted it, and sent it to the same secure channel he had used that morning. After that, he shut the terminal and turned to look for one of the footmen. It was the younger one, who was only 23 and had been on the carry team. He was putting fresh linens in the service alcove, moving his hands fast and looking down. Edric murmured softly, "Gareth." The young man was shocked. "Sergeant, did you carry the box this morning? To the East Parlor?" Gareth's face turned white. He nodded once, but it was stiff. "Tell me what you saw." "Sir, I just did what I was told, with gloves on. Gave the case to the Queen Consort, then stepped back. That's it. Did she open it?" There was a pause, then a whispered yes. "Yes, sir." "Did she take the metal off herself?" There was another silence, this time longer. "No, sir. She made him do it." Gareth's voice got so low it was almost a whisper. It would mean more if he took it out himself like it was his. Edric didn't say anything, just kept the young man's eyes for a long time. It looked like Gareth could be sick. Finally, Edric said, "You can go." Gareth nodded, picked up his cart, and departed right away. Too fast. Edric stood alone in the corridor. The only sound was the hum of the castle's antiquated heating system, which sounded like it was his. That word kept coming back to him. They hadn't merely given away a sign. They had sought to change who it belonged to. He turned the corner into the Blue Room's antechamber and ran into one of the press liaisons who was getting the room ready. He said, "Did Her Majesty have any guests this morning?" The woman blinked. "Yes, private tea. No photographers, just Her Majesty and Mr. Parker Bowles." Edric didn't say anything. He merely moved his head a little. And what kind of visit was it? She thought about it. "We weren't told, but one of the aides said she gave him a gift and said it was a sign." Edric only breathed out through his nose once. "A symbol." The press liaison moved around uneasily. Is something wrong?" Edric didn't answer right away. He was glancing past her now at the service corridor, where 2 young staff members were whispering near the tea station. When they caught him observing, they stopped talking right away and straightened up, but their expressions told the story. Pale, tight, and unsure. They realized something was wrong, even if they didn't know the whole story. A woman in her 40s who had worked for 3 kings attracted his eye. She shook her head just a little, which may mean she didn't like it, or was perhaps ashamed. Then she turned around and walked away with her hands tightly clutched in front of her. Word was already getting out, the kind of whisper that traveled faster than any official report. Housekeepers, valets, and kitchen workers didn't require memos to know when the rules had been broken. They could feel it in the air, in how tight the rules were all of a sudden, and in how senior personnel stayed away from specific passageways. Edric knew that by lunchtime everyone in the castle would know, and by evening someone would say something. There was always someone. He went back into the hallway. The quiet was suddenly thicker. That was it. Andrew Parker Bowles, a man who had been divorced from the late Queen for a long time, retired from public service, and was associated to one of the worst personal humiliations of her reign, had received the Queen's U.S. Honor Medal, a small gift that became a treasured piece of art. Edric stared down at the open valet slip again. It was a present from one consort to her ex-husband. Utilizing the legacy of a woman, neither of them had really been there for when it mattered. No archival signature, no official clearance, no memory, just convenience. He folded the slip in half and walked back to the archive. He had to see something for himself. The archive hall smelled like varnish and paper. Sergeant Edric Vaughan walked into the cool room. The air changed from the warmth left over from the East Wing to something more conserved and controlled, like the breath of a room that understood it had weight. He walked right to the rear, where there was a locked drawer with the words "Blue Drawing Room Memorabilia" on it. Each drawer had a magnetic tag on it. Every tag was linked to a log, and there was a line on each log indicating who touched what, when, and why. There was no update for drawer number 3. The Queen's U.S. Honor Medal was still on display and not for handling. Edric stayed there for a long time, his hand on the brass handle and his thumb tracing the slight ridge along its edge. A small memory tremor flared behind his eyes. 4 years ago, on a peaceful afternoon, it rained on the north lawn. When the Queen requested for him, not her secretary or a page, but him, he was stationed just outside her private reading room. He had walked in, and she had motioned for him to come closer, not with grandeur, but with trust and intimacy. There was a small velvet case on a nearby table, next to a teacup and an old volume of letters. At first, she didn't say anything. She just opened it. The honor medal is within. American, sleek and clean. Something you don't see very often on British uniforms, let alone on a monarch's sleeve. They gave it in Washington, she stated simply, after everything changed. For solidarity. She didn't say what the attacks were. She didn't talk about headlines or summits. She didn't have to. They gave it for duty, she said, not for display. She then closed the case and put it away, as if showing it had served its function. Edric had never told anyone about that moment, not even the guards he trusted the most. It didn't seem like the right thing to do. It had felt more like a blessing than anything else. That identical medal was gone now. Not borrowed, but given. He left the archive hall and headed back to the blue drawing room. The room was buzzing with light and gloss as work went on. The glass case stayed open, and the velvet-lined podium stayed where it was. A faint rectangle below it showed where the medal had been resting, a ghost of dust and shape. The empty lid of the velvet box was sagging back as if it had been neglected in the middle of a task. There was a draft of a press release on the seat next to it. The top line said, "A symbolic gesture. Queen Camilla honors Andrew Parker Bowles' long service in the military." There was no mention of the Queen or where the medal came from. Instead, there was a photo placeholder, where the medal now shone, not behind glass, but on the lapel of a man who had left Her Majesty in the margins of history. Edric didn't say anything, but he stretched out, closed the box, and snapped the clasp shut. No ceremony, no comment, just silence, and the start of something he knew wouldn't remain quiet for long. The blue drawing room hummed like only royal rooms could. Quiet words, swift looks, and silver trays moving without a sound. They were putting chairs in semicircles. A new flower arrangement was moved around to catch the sun in the late morning. The aides moved like stage designers, not like personnel. 2 press secretaries and a royal planner were with Camilla when she walked in. She had on a light cream coat and soft gloves. One hand moved slightly as she talked about how the lunch reception would look. "Let's make sure we have a photographer by the eastern alcove," she said. And this time no shadows across the brows. "That angle is just awful." Sergeant Edric Vaughn was already in place, 2 steps inside the door. He didn't say hello. He did talk, even if this wasn't a barracks. "Ma'am," he began, and his voice was clear and steady. "Can I check who has the medal right now?" Camilla stopped in the middle of her step. She turned her head, and then she progressively changed the rest of her body. The smile on her face changed into something more showy. Her gaze darted to the aides, who paused. "Excuse me," she asked, still warm on the outside. Edric said, "The U.S. Honor Medal that belonged to Her Majesty, the Queen. I want to make sure I know who has it, now that it was taken down this morning." She blinked briefly, and took a little breath before saying, "Oh, that old thing." Her voice became slightly amused, even light-hearted. "Yes, I had it brought back," she said. "Andrew served his country once, cavalry decades ago. I thought it was a nice thing to do. Sentiment suits him." Edric stayed still. "It wasn't yours to give," he added, and the air got tense. Camilla turned her head. She continued, "You're talking to the Queen Consort," her voice smooth but lower now. "And I'm talking about an act that erased hers," Edric said calmly. One of the assistants adjusted their weight, a movement that was almost too little to notice, but showed that they were uncomfortable. Camilla moved her jaw once, but she didn't say anything right away. "I get why people love these tokens," she said, "but it wasn't a public artifact. No one even knew what it was. It was a private item, and I just saw it as something that needed to be put to rest." Edric's voice kept calm. "That medal was given out across oceans and institutions. It was never shown off to get attention. It was only given to remember. It was never passed down until this morning." She sighed briefly, as if to say, "Oh well, you soldiers hold on to the ceremonial. You forget that sometimes the past has to change. Edric's face didn't change, but the hush around him did. Nobody said anything. The florist even backed away from the arrangement. One of the press aides took their phone away from their ear and just listened. Camilla's voice got even colder. I believe this talk is over. But Edric didn't move. Not because of his responsibility or his posture. He only said, it should never have started. That was when the room got warmer. No yelling, no trouble, just the fact that every assistant, staff member, and royal functionary observing knew that something had happened today that couldn't be undone with a news release or a photo. Camilla straightened her back. Sergeant, you should remember your place. Edric's voice was low. I haven't forgotten it, ma'am. I've been standing in it all morning. She turned around without saying anything else. But the fight wasn't finished. It had just become clear. Nobody moved for a moment. The air in the blue drawing room had gotten thicker. Not because of the heat or the stress, but because something had moved off axis. Camilla was toward the center. Her hands still folded over her clutch. Her lips were parted as if she had more to say, but was choosing not to. She turned back to the exhibition podium, where the velvet box was still there, but it was closed now because of Edric. She looked at it for a little while. Then she spoke again, this time louder, so that the aides who were still there could hear her. It's amazing how much noise people can make over things that were never even worn. She stared straight at Edric. It was just a medal. Soldiers hold on to symbols. She didn't wear it or talk about it in public. If it meant something, she had a lifetime to show it. That was when it happened. Not a yell or an explosion, but a snap. A clean breach in Edric Vaughn's studied calm, which he had built up over 20 years of discipline, sand-covered posts, and silent guard shifts outside chambers full of power. That medal, he replied, his voice firm but sharper, was earned by every family that stood behind her when this country was alone. Camilla blinked, not for show or ceremony, but because she stood when no one else could. She didn't flinch when Parliament was unsure or alliances were shaky. He raised his voice, not loud, but clear and projected. And now you've pinned it to the lapel of a man who left her, who made her a joke in her own reign. And you did it without asking, without permission, and without shame. One of the assistants for the press dropped their stylus. Camilla's voice was tense. You forget who you are. No, ma'am, Edric responded, standing his ground. I remember her. The words pierced through the room like a sword. Camilla walked forward, her heels clicking on the marble. You are a guardsman. You shouldn't ask about family matters. Edric stayed still. I keep the memory of the king safe, he stated. That doesn't stop when the crown goes. He pointed to the empty exhibit with a casual gesture, not a dramatic one, and said that it wasn't a family heirloom. That was a promise between two countries. You can't change that with tea and feelings. The room was completely motionless, not the ceremonial stillness of a formal function, but the shocked quiet that comes after something has happened that can't be changed. The room stayed still for a moment. The castle's hum, the faint shuffling of feet, and even the slight draft through the lofty windows all stopped at the same time. Then a door creaked open behind them. It was gentle but definitive, and no one dared to look because they already knew who it was. Heavy footsteps came into the room, slowly. Camilla's mouth turned into a narrow line, and her body straightened up on its own. The helpers stopped moving. Someone bowed their head. Another stepped back. King Charles stood just inside the door, his face inscrutable. He looked at Camilla, then Edric, and finally the package. He didn't say anything immediately away. No need to. As soon as he stepped through the door, everyone knew the rules had changed. The hush lasted, and then he asked, as if he were talking, "Where's the medal?" Camilla opened her mouth. I wasn't asking you." Her lips shut. Charles stared at Edric again. "Sergeant." Edric took a breath, not to calm himself down, but because it was the right thing to do. "It was taken away, sir. It was given privately, without a chain of custody." Charles nodded once. "I see." He slowly turned to face the attendants. The next command wouldn't be yelled, but it would be heard. King Charles walked all the way inside the room. He didn't yell. He didn't look around to see if anybody agreed with him. He took up space like only a king could, by being there and demanding everyone else shut up without asking. His eyes slowly went from face to face. Camilla remained rigid and collected, and the attendants were frozen in the middle of their work. Edric was not moved or shaken. Then he looked at the closed velvet box. "Someone tell me," he asked in a calm, steady voice, "why a medal given by a foreign head of state and never allowed to be released is no longer in its case." Camilla let out a small breath, too controlled to be a sigh. "It was a personal gesture," she stated in a clipped, professional voice. I thought it would mean something to him because he wore a uniform once, a long time ago. Charles didn't look back. He said it again softly. It would mean something to him. A long break. Small gestures, he finally said. It's always little things that mess up the big things. Camilla moved forward. It wasn't meant to cause trouble. Now Charles turned all the way around to face her. It was for her, he said. The sentence stayed there. The end. He looked back at Edric. Sergeant Vaughn. Sir, in your opinion, Charles asked, where should it be? Edric didn't think twice. Under glass, sir. That's where she left it. A single nod. Charles's eyes moved to the closest assistant next to him. Give it back, he stated simply. Now quietly, without drawing attention. One of the attendants moved right away, almost falling over in their hurry. Someone else had already taken out their phone to send a secure message. Camilla didn't say anything. Charles took a breath. Not the sort that filled his lungs, but the kind that focused everything inside a body that had been educated from birth to deny what it felt. He turned around and stared at the velvet box. She never publicly accepted that medal, he added. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because she knew it wasn't hers alone. It was never meant to be seen, only kept. He didn't only say those things to Camilla. Everyone in the room could use them, he said. I won't let it become theater, and I won't let it be used to decorate my personal history. Camilla's voice was barely above a whisper. You're turning this into a scandal. No, Charles repeated again, turning to her. You did that. I'm done. Then to Edric, with a hint of reverence in his voice. Thanks, Sergeant. You remembered her. Edric nodded, a short, hard ceremonial nod that showed he was holding back. Charles turned to leave and gave directions to a secretary who had just come in. Camilla stayed behind and looked at the package. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to, since for the first time all day, the room seemed like it belonged to the Queen and the man who still remembered her. Within an hour, the medal was back. There was no ceremony, no assistants posing for pictures, and the day's official court circular didn't mention it. A plain-clothed security liaison brought it in, wearing gloves and a velvet case, and handed it to Sergeant Edric Vaughn without saying a word. The footman who had helped take it away at first stood behind them, stiff and without making eye contact. Edric didn't know why he was doing it, and he didn't need to. What mattered was that it was back. He walked through the blue drawing room with the silent weight of someone bringing more than just an object. A few staff members who were still there stopped and said nothing as he walked by. Even people who didn't know the whole tale could see that something had broken previously, and that this was the fix. Edric opened the display cabinet by himself. The velvet underlay was still a little warm from the morning sun. There was still a slight dip where the ribbon had lay, showing the weight of the medal. He carefully put the case down and then opened the lid with care. The medal was within, undisturbed, with a shiny silver face. The ribbon had two sides, one crimson with a Union Jack, and the other navy blue. It was a little wrinkled. The thin white lines on the US flag seemed like veins of shared burden running through it. It didn't need to shine to be seen. It only needed to be at the perfect spot. Edric put it in its bracket, and then pushed the glass cover back down and locked it. Then he grabbed the sign. The original description, which was simple and archival, was taken out. A new plate was waiting in a white archival envelope, with the private secretary's office on it. Edric opened it and read the modest brass engraving. Personal bequest of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, not for transfer or display, maintained in situ by private order, 2023. He carefully put it under the case, making sure that the brass frame was square with the velvet border. Finished. Footsteps came up behind him. Edric turned, thinking it may be the aide who brought him the note, or the planner who had been sent to check that it was installed. It was King Charles, not someone else. No announcement, no hoopla, simply the king walking alone, like his mother had done before. King Charles stayed quietly by the spectacle for a long time. The blue drawing room was so peaceful that it felt almost holy. Sunlight shone on the polished floors, catching the edges of chairs and silver trays. Camilla stayed behind him, watching and not saying anything. Her face still had that tightly controlled look, but even she couldn't hide how heavy the situation was. The Foreign Office sent an accredited diplomatic lensman to take pictures of the welcome. He got there early that morning, much before the fight and King Charles' arrival, but not before the presentation. One picture, a nicely framed shot, showed Andrew Parker B.S. sitting in a high-backed chair in the East Parlor, drinking tea next to Camilla, and wearing the Queen's U.S. Honor Medal on his chest. It hadn't been released yet, but it had been caught, and by the end of the day, rumors had made their way to the palace's press office. What's that medal on his jacket? Isn't that the Queen's? Did he get it? The inquiries didn't hit the news yet, but they didn't have to. The picture had been surreptitiously taken out of the approval queue by 6 o'clock. They told the aides to go through all the event photos. There was no rationale stated, simply a need for speed. There was a new tension in the castle, but it wasn't about scandal, it was about confinement. There was only one order from King Charles: seal the report. The walls will take care of the rest. There would be no announcement, no correction, only silence. But by the next day, a number of names were missing from the list of guests for the scheduled diplomatic luncheon. People who worked for Camilla didn't answer the phone. One of her junior staff members was surreptitiously moved to Edinburgh. The East Parlour was not used for the rest of the week. Camilla never went back into the blue drawing room, not even when Charles welcomed the American group 4 days later. She stayed upstairs, observing from the upper gallery, her shadow behind flimsy curtains. Sergeant Edric Vaughan went back to his post down below. He didn't say anything about what happened. He didn't have to, because the medal was still behind glass, still sealed, and still undamaged. Every staff member, planner, and footman who walked by it now did so with a look that lasted half a second longer. They didn't simply think about the Queen, they remembered who had stopped her from being wiped, and that was all they needed. Do you think Camilla had the right to give a medal from another country that was only for the Queen? Should Sergeant Vaughan have spoken up, or should he have been quiet even if he was in uniform? And if you were King Charles, would you have acted sooner? If this tale hit home, hit the like button now. Click the bell symbol to subscribe so you never miss anything that happens within palace walls. Also, share this video with someone who still knows what responsibility is. Symbols don't go away on their own. We have to allow them. There are many like that. Now watch the next story on your screen. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time and place.